Someone is stalking my wife and we had no idea. This is what we know now, and you aren't gonna believe what we found out at the end. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and become fully immersed in today's adventure, you found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck because you're gonna need it. Also, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Enjoy the show. So if you don't watch our live streams or you're new to the channel, you probably wouldn't know this, but me and my wife are in the middle of a cross-country move. We're moving from Chicago to Phoenix, and for the past month, it's been scheduling movers, scheduling flights, packing all of our stuff, taking everything down. Our house is an absolute shambles. And anybody that's been a part of a cross-country move knows how out of it you are during it. During the entire situation, it's so overwhelming, you start to kind of ignore your surroundings and you start missing minute details that you would probably notice in your everyday life. Or at least anything outside of the move feels like a minute detail, even though it should probably be a big, glaring detail that you should probably pay attention to, and I wish I did beforehand. So like I said, we'd been packing, we'd been taking everything down, and one of the specific items that we took down in our house was our curtains. And one of the things that we really love about this house, the reason that we rented it, was the massive open windows that it had, because during the day there was so much natural sunlight in the house. But obviously you like the option of being able to cover those windows for privacy at night, because during the day you can't see into the windows because the sunlight is reflecting on the outside. But at night, when we have our lights on in our house, we could barely see outside, and anybody that's on the street or surrounding the house can see directly in. But when you're trying to properly plan a cross-country move, you tend to take stuff down early to try to get ahead because everything feels so overwhelming, and you pack very important things early and ship it off weeks before you need to. What I'm trying to say is that we took our curtains down and I shipped them to Phoenix and we don't have them. And this was kind of a double-edged sword, because even though it was horrifying and creepy, and I'll get to those parts as I keep going, it's kind of good that we didn't have the curtains because we were able to see what was outside of our house looking in. Even if it was just faintly at night, it gave us a hint that somebody was watching us that then led to figuring it out. So now picture this. Our house is basically half taken down, half our furniture is gone, our curtains are completely gone. We basically live in a glass box. So from the day that we took those curtains down, my wife Jess started to give me her concerns. She started confiding in me, saying that she didn't really like that the windows were wide open, especially at night. She started to get this sense that somebody was looking at her. And of course that happens. When you walk by gaping windows and it's completely pitch black outside, you feel like, oh, there might be something creepy outside. I was feeling it too, if I'm being completely honest with you, but not to the point where I was staring out into the dark abyss looking for a figure across the street staring back. But even though I wasn't there, that didn't mean that Jess wasn't there. It didn't help that there's a for rent sign just sticking out in the front lawn, and people are driving by every day, slowing down and looking at it, then trying to take a look at the house to see if it's worth calling the number on it to maybe get a tour. So there's constantly cars pulling over, even pulling into our driveway, poking around the house, looking in through the windows because they're assuming that there's a for rent sign because nobody lives here. So for the past few weeks, there's been people wandering around the house and lurking out front. So now with the curtains and that, everything around the house just feels a little bit weird because there's constantly strangers lurking around. So one night as we're eating dinner on our couch, because we sent our dining table a couple weeks ago as well, Jess gets up to get us a couple beverages from the mini fridge that's in our front room. And in our front room, we have the biggest windows that we have in the whole house. And as she walks in, she can't help herself but to look out and peer into the darkness of these front windows, and she says that she thinks she sees somebody staring back at her. For a couple moments, I'm wondering why she hasn't come back with my beverage yet, but then she starts kind of whispering, almost in a whimper, like, babe, come here, come here. And she's not moving, and she just keeps telling me to come into the front room with her. So naturally, when you hear your partner kind of calling to you from the other room in a frantic whisper, you get up quickly and I scurry over behind her, and she's standing there motionless, staring out our front window, saying, do you see that? Do you see that guy behind that tree? And I'm trying to look out of it, and like I said, when it's nighttime, you can't see out that well. So we're both just standing there, just kind of leaning, trying to get a better angle, squinting our eyes at this random tree that's across the street, seeing if the small knot that's sticking out on the edge of the tree is gonna move, and if it is somebody standing slightly behind it, peering in. And I'm trying to calm myself down, and I'm trying to calm her down, but she's telling me, I think I saw him move. I thought I saw him standing moving slightly to the left, but when I looked at him, he slid behind the tree just ever so slightly and hasn't moved since. So at this point, I'm committed to staring at this guy, to stare at this knot that's on the edge of this tree, to see if it is a person peering out until he moves. And I'm willing to just stand there and not blink to see if it actually is somebody. Because if she said she saw him move, I believe her, so I'm going to try to get to the truth here. But the longer we stand there, the more it just kind of seems to blend into the tree. We must have waited staring for 5 full minutes. We even tried to dim our lights because our front room has dimmable lights. It doesn't just turn on and off. So we tried to dim them slightly to see if it would give us a better view of across the street without completely blacking out our vision. But we eventually dimmed the lights until it was completely dark and the knot on the end of that tree didn't move. So we just assumed it must have been the nub of some branch that got cut down. We have to assume that. There wasn't a glare to an eye. There wasn't a full figure. It just kind of looked like someone might have been like this. But eventually, because you're trying to calm yourself down as you're staring at this thing, your mind is working against your eyes. You're trying to look for proof that it is nothing. So as it's not moving, eventually you convince yourself. So that's what we did. We assumed that she saw something out of the corner of her eye and that was nobody. So we eventually went back to the couch and we watched our favorite TV show, and as we were sitting there, I heard something at our front door. I thought I saw a little bit of a shadow out of the oval glass of our front door, and then I thought I heard our mailbox kind of clink open. It was very similar to the sound that it makes when the mailman just opens it up and drops something in. So that matched with what I saw in my peripheral. I had to go check it out. But when I got up to the front door and I turned on our porch light and I started looking through the front glass, I didn't see anybody and our mailbox was closed. This should have been much more concerning to me at the time, but like I said, when you're in those situations, your mind works against your eyes, and in this case also works against your ears. We were still a little bit jumpy, so we just made sure everything was locked before we wrapped up our show, cleaned the kitchen, and went to bed. The next morning we had some errands to run, so we had our coffees, we got dressed, we had our showers, we got into our minivan, and we pulled out of our garage. But as we're backing out of our garage and onto the main street, Jess goes, Look at the tree. So I turn and I look towards the tree, and wouldn't you know it, the trunk is perfectly straight. There's no knot on this trunk. There's no lump from an old branch. This tree does not have a lump on the side of it. So whatever we were seeing the night before was something behind the tree. And we didn't like this one bit because we knew, even though we couldn't really see what was behind the tree, we couldn't see that it was a guy. There was no proof, no evidence that it was a head or if anybody was looking at us. We didn't know if it was an animal. All we knew was that this tree did not have a lump, and we saw a lump. So even though that shook us up in the morning, we had an incredibly busy day ahead of us. Like I said, cross-country move. We got a lot that we're doing. A tree lump kind of goes into the back of your head when you know that you're shipping all of your belongings 3,000 miles away and you're not going to have them for 15 days and you have to correlate your flights. I'm not even going to stress you out with that. I'm going to get back to the story. What I'm saying is we completely forgot, and we were so exhausted when we came home, we weren't really looking out the windows. We weren't super paranoid. We've been tired. So even if something happened that night, if somebody was lurking out of the windows, we were so exhausted, we didn't notice a thing. Cool demon, haunt me tomorrow. And the next morning started exactly like the morning before. We got up, we had our coffee, we showered, we got dressed, we piled into the minivan, this time with our dog. We opened our garage and we started backing out. And I was kind of zoning out. Jess was driving. I was focusing on Leo in the back seat because he doesn't really like driving. He was whining and whimpering. And usually it's a smooth reverse out of our driveway. But this time, Jess stomped on the brakes and was like, "Who is that?" So I whipped my head around to see who's in our driveway. I'm suspecting it's another one of the people that pulled over to check out the house, a potential renter. But there's no car. We do have a lot of foot traffic on our block, but nobody walks into our driveway and just stands there. So I popped the door open because get out of the way, we have errands to run. And why are you on my property and why are you in my driveway blocking us from getting out of our house? I was also a little bit grumpy because I've been so exhausted, and I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't slightly rude to this guy. I was. I'm a very kind, polite person, but when somebody's standing on my property where they shouldn't be, inconveniencing us, I'm not going to be the nicest guy. I wasn't overly mean, but I wasn't warm. I got out and I was like, "Hey, do you need something?" And the guy had no answers for me. He just kind of like looked around, looked at me funny, and then looked towards the sign. So I assumed he's a renter. So I just went ahead and answered the question that all of the other people that were acting like this guy asked me. And I said, just call the number on the sign and set up an appointment to view the house. We're still living here. Please move. And this guy was just awkward and acted a little bit weird and just kind of stepped out of the way. He didn't even go to the sidewalk. He stepped out of the way onto the grass next to our driveway and let us pass him. And naturally, I told Jess, close the garage. We're not leaving until the garage is secured and closed and locked. This guy's a little bit weird. So once we knew the house was secure, we drove off because we have stuff to do. But when we got home later that day, our neighbor, who's a very good friend of ours, let us know that that dude stuck around and was poking around our house and was trying to get into our backyard. And naturally, our neighbor told him to not go in the yard. And what are you doing? Schedule an appointment. Why are you lurking around the edges of the house? Because it's not just like he's lurking around my house, he's also lurking around his house. So he's protective of his property and mine. And our neighbor actually got into a verbal altercation with this guy because this guy was trying to justify why he was doing it. And he was leaning into the fact that he was interested in renting it. And he wanted to see what the yard was like. But that's not normal person behavior. If you're renting a place, you call so you could go see the place. And the verbal altercation got so bad that our neighbor threatened to call the police, and that was the only thing that got this guy to leave. So after he tells me that, we have a good laugh because we're like, we're definitely going to tell the landlord to not rent to that guy because our neighbor doesn't want to live next to that weirdo. So that was the fun drama of the day. Like I said, there had been a lot of people acting weird out front of our house recently. So it wasn't that weird. And again, we were exhausted that day. We've been exhausted. So we're trying to relax. We're on our couch. We're watching our shows. We're eating our dinner. And it starts to rain. It's actually a very calm night. We were cherishing the downpour on the roof as we're watching our scary shows, getting really cozy, eating warmed up apple cider donuts and pumpkin spice ice cream sandwiches, feeling really spooky, feeling really festive in this season. And usually when it rains, me and my neighbor text each other, just make sure that his basement isn't flooding, his sump pup's working. He makes sure that ours is good. He has a generator, we don't. So he makes sure that our electricity's on if we need anything. We just check on each other when there's storms going on. So I get the usual text. I was expecting it. I was going to text him pretty soon anyway because the lightning was getting pretty crazy and there was a tornado warning. But he texts me first saying, "Hey bud, is your basement flooding?" And I just reply, "No, I think it's good. The sub pump's working fine. I think we're good for tonight." And then he follows up by saying, "Is the egress window leaking or something?" And if you don't know what an egress window is, it's one of those windows that are in the bedroom of basements where there's like a half well dug into the ground for the window. So if there's a fire, people could climb out of that window. It's just a safety hazard thing. It's a type of window that you need to have in a bedroom in the basement for it to be considered a real bedroom. So my neighbor asked me, is that window leaking? Because usually there's a drain at the bottom of those windows. So if it rains, there's a drain for it so it doesn't fill up and tidal wave into your basement. And I reply, no. The egress window is fine. The drain is working fine. But then this man texts me, "Why are you in the well of the egress window?" And I quickly reply, "I'm not in the egress window. I'm on the couch." And he replies very quickly, "I don't want to scare you, but somebody is. And I thought it was you." So I sprint down into my basement, bat in hand. I whip around the corner into the bedroom where I have a clear sight of the egress window. And I clearly see a full-grown man crouched down in the well of our egress window, fiddling with the locks. I just naturally shouted, "Hey," as I flicked on the lights. And once the lights turned on, he frantically scurried out of the well and ran off. He was wearing a black hood and we were able to see on our neighbor's Ring camera him climb out of the well. We also saw him crawl into it, which was also very unsettling, but we watched him run away. And he didn't run away like he was this ultra good spy, this incredible burglar, capable of sneaking in houses and stealing jewelry and getting away unscathed. He ran away like he had a bad left knee and a bad right hip, and he's been fighting low back pain for 20 years. It was kind of pathetic, but very unsettling, disturbing nonetheless. Anybody trying to get into your home is going to freak you out. So we spend the rest of this night talking with our neighbor, kind of freaked out about the whole situation, obviously because if it's a burglar, he's worried too because our area is being scouted and targeted, and we're watching the Ring footage over and over again to see if any odd cars drove by earlier to attach him to some type of vehicle so he could actually give something to the police to look for, or some type of vehicle that we could look out for. But there's only so much you could do. There's only so much footage you could watch. And we're not detectives. We have stuff to do the next morning. He has stuff to do the next morning. So eventually we give up, we make sure everything's locked, and we both have to go to bed. And this next morning, we actually have a showing at the house. The realtor is going to bring some of the weird strangers that have been seeing the sign and pulling over and peeking into our windows. She's bringing a few of them into our house all together to see who wants to rent this place next. And naturally, she scheduled it for bright and early. So again, coffee, shower, get dressed, but this time we had to head over to my parents' house and we had to bring our dog with us because we can't just have our dog wandering around the house that doesn't know any of these people. He's going to get protective. It's dangerous for them and it's dangerous for him. So we have to bring him into the minivan and we take him with us. So we were just planning on having a doggy play date at my mom's house, and I was going to help her with a couple renovations over there. But once we got there, we were there for about 20-30 minutes. But then I remembered I forgot a tool that I needed to help her with this renovation. So I had to swing home for a little bit. I didn't want to drag the dog and Jess back with me, so I just went back myself. And during this little excursion back to my own house to get this tool, I crossed paths with the people that were viewing the house that day as the realtor, and they were coming out. There were 5 people total viewing the house that morning. 2 were couples that seemed to be minding their own business. They barely even looked at me. They were just talking about the house they viewed and their opinion on it and if they wanted to live there. But there was one guy that was there solo, and he looked at me very funny, and I recognized him right away. It was the dude in the driveway that I was kind of rude to. And initially I thought he was looking at me funny because I was a little bit rude to him. But then his look got even weirder and his head was slightly tilted, and I just got a weird feeling from this guy. And as I was thinking about it and as I was passing this guy, it felt like a guilty look to me. And my head immediately goes to, did you steal something from my house? A lot of my belongings already aren't there, but some of my valuables are. And with the way that he's looking at me, I'm thinking that he might have taken something and I should probably go figure it out before he leaves. So I run into the house and I look for my most valuable things. I go to my favorite prized possessions, the stuff that holds the most worth, and it's all there. Nothing's misplaced, nothing's gone. But I still didn't like the way that he looked at me. So my head pivoted to security now, and I just started instinctually checking the locks. I made sure that all the doors were good. I made sure the garage door is good. The inside garage door that also locks, just in case anybody pries our garage door open. And then I started moving on to our windows, and I never really check our windows. We don't open them too much. We're kind of like an AC heat house, and if we want fresh air, we just go outside. So for some reason in my gut, I feel like we should check the windows, and it was probably because somebody was in the egress well. So I check that window first, and that's locked, so we're good there. Then I check all the basement windows, bedroom, bathroom, living room, and then I move on to the spare bedroom that's on the complete other side of the house from our master bedroom. And we never touch those windows. That room is specifically if somebody's visiting. We don't even go in there. Sometimes we use a closet for some storage, but we do not enter that room. There's no reason one of those windows should be unlocked. And when I open the door, I look in and I look towards the locks on these windows, and they don't look unlocked. So initially I'm like, okay, we're good. But then my gut tells me to just check each one manually by hand. And thank God I did, because I start from the left, that one's locked, that one's locked, and then I grab the third one, and it looks locked. But right behind the little swivel handle, there's a little piece of wood jammed behind it, so it looks as if it's locked. It's as far as it could go to make it appear as if it's locked, but it's unlocked. And there's this little piece of wood that blends in with the frame, blocking it from being locked. And in my head, I felt like that could only be intentional. Because if this has been like that the entire time we've lived here, we've had a security issue, and we are very serious about security. The first thing we did was lock all the windows when we moved here. We know we're an AC family, but we haven't touched them since. Nobody goes in those rooms. We haven't had anybody visit. There's no reason there should be something obstructing that lock on that window. So after I found that one, I had to go to all of the other windows again just to make sure nothing was being obstructed and our house was secure. And once I did that second round, I was positive our house is a fortress and we are safe. So I lock up the house and I head back to my parents' house to go get Jess and my dog and let them know what we found out. I don't really fill in my mom about what happened because I don't want her to worry. She's already worried about us moving, and I don't want to pile this on top of it. If somebody was trying to break into the house, there's a high likelihood it's because they're squatters and they saw the for rent sign and they didn't think anybody was living there. That conclusion is much more likely, and I don't need to stress my mom about it. We're about to move anyway if somebody's trying to break in. So we finish up the doggy play date and the renovation, conversations, and we head back home. Another exhausting day. We shower and we get into bed. So I'm just laying there going over everything that happened throughout the day, all the stuff we have planned for the upcoming week, this move, this big life change, and Jess knows I'm kind of stressed about it, and she's going to start to comfort me as she usually does, and she rolls over in our bed to talk to me. And as she's doing it, she puts her hand under her pillow and one hand here, you know how you hug the pillow to get nice and cozy on your side as you're about to start talking. But when she slid her bottom hand under her pillow, she jerked back because she felt something under it that she wasn't expecting. And she abruptly sits up, she grabs her pillow, she picks it up to expose whatever is under it, and holds the pillow as if she's ready to hit whatever's under it because she doesn't know what it is. She probably assumes it's a bug. But once she lifts that pillow, we're both looking at a sheet of paper that looks like a handwritten letter. Hey guys, just taking a quick break from this story. I wanted to let you guys know that we're dropping another merchandise drop because the last one went so well. This time it is the Joshua Tree merch. Take a look. I think it's pretty sweet. If you can't afford the merchandise, don't even worry about it. Just watch the video. Just like the video. It's all good. We just want to give free content to you guys. Some people ask us to make merchandise, so we're making it for them. We only make about 75 of these, so if you really want them, grab one. We want to spend our time making free videos for you, not packaging merch all the time. But we think this design is really cool, and we think you guys will like it, and hopefully it sells out just like last time. Back to the show. So she picks it up and we're inspecting it. Like, why is this here? And she told me that she wasn't sure if I had written her a handwritten note, if it was this cute thing. But once she read the first line, she knew it wasn't from me. The note said this: "Dear caring wife, oblivious wife, naive but committed wife. Your husband is not who you think he is, and he doesn't deserve you. I see how you take care of him. I see all the little things you do, and I see the things that you don't see too. Your husband is a traveler, professional through and through, but a liar and conniver that takes from me and lies to you. My wife used to cherish me the way you cherish him, until he cherished her in ways that we would call sin. Our marriage is broken. It's garbage. He trashed it. Your husband's a cheater. This letter's a check. I'd cash it. You don't believe that this could happen to you until you confront him about what happened in Ohio." And after Jess finishes reading this thing out loud, she holds it up like this with a sour scowl on her face, not in the way that you think. She looks at me and she goes, "You've never been to Ohio." And she's right. I've never been to Ohio, and this note is ridiculous. And now I know for absolute sure, 100%, 1000% guarantee, put it in the bank, cash it like he said, it was that weird dude that looked at me weird in my driveway, and then while he was coming out of my house, it disgusted me. He was in my space. And now everything that's been happening comes together and it's making sense. He was the knot on the tree. He was the one clinking open the mailbox. He was out in the front door. He was in our driveway. He was trying to get in our yard. He's been watching my wife from the windows because we have no curtains. This man is obsessed with my wife, and I don't blame him. Me too. But calling to get a tour from the realtor to leave a note under her pillow lit a fire in me that I've never felt before. Not to mention that I found that obstruction in that bedroom window. He was trying to keep it unlocked to get inside, like he was trying to get into the egress well window. This man was insane and obsessed and dangerous. He's done multiple things imposing on our privacy and our security. He is deranged. So naturally at that point, we cannot go to sleep no matter how exhausted we are. We are upset. We're reading this letter over and over, and we're talking to each other in a very intense manner about what our next move is. And our dog is whining and whimpering and whistling because he could tell that we're on edge, and he doesn't like that. He's a very chill dog, but when we have high anxiety, he kind of meets us where we're at, and he tries to calm us down by getting our attention. And I need to give you some context on our dog for the rest of this story to make sense, so bear with me. Our dog is very aloof. He doesn't bark that much. He doesn't jump on windowsills and stare at the window for people outside to see him. He honestly doesn't make his presence very known if you're not in the house with him. He's trained extremely well, and when we let him into the yard, he goes straight into the dog run to go potty, and he just comes right back in. And we run him every single day at the park, so it's not like he's in the yard going crazy all the time. We have a set time. We load him into the minivan and we take him to the park every morning. And I didn't realize how aloof he was from the outside looking in, and how our routine almost hid him from the public. See, we load our dog into our minivan that's in our garage, and we also have tinted windows on the van, so nobody would even see us put put the dog in the van because the garage is attached to the house, and he doesn't go staring out the windows. So if you're watching the house, you really don't have any idea that we have a dog. And on top of that, Jess usually goes out with him when he goes potty and just picks up after him right away. So even if you got into the yard, there's no sign of the dog. And on top of all of that, we shipped a ton of our stuff to our new house already. His dog beds aren't even here. His toys aren't here. His bowl is this weird maze puzzle bowl, so he doesn't eat so fast, and he slobbers so much that we wash it pretty often. And his food kind of has a fishy scent, so we don't just leave his bowl sitting out. And I didn't realize that all of these things together would hide the fact that we own a dog. So even though this guy did a tour of the house, saw every single room, was in our yard, looking through our egress window, watching us through the windows, he had no idea we had a dog. Now this part is super important. Like I said, you need to understand this for this to make sense. Our dog is a 100-pound European purebred Doberman pinscher that was sent to personal protection board and train. He's a unit, he's gigantic, and he's protective. His head is like a crocodile and his body is like a horse and a panther had a baby. When I tell you this dog is an absolute unit, a European Doberman powerhouse, built like a brick shithouse, I am not exaggerating, and we feed him the high quality food and we run him every day, he is jacked. So we're having this intense conversation and he's whining, and we want to finish our conversation, so we let him out the side door. Because I can only assume that he needs to potty, maybe he wants to get away from what he perceives as an argument, and I don't really want to have this intense, important discussion over a Doberman whistle. So let me paint this picture for you. Our side door goes onto our porch that then goes into our backyard. When you open the side door, there's the porch for about 5 feet, and then there's about 3 steps down into the yard. And that portion of the yard is fully grassed, and there's a floodlight that turns on if there's any major movement in the grass. The floodlight is designed to not go on if there's like bunnies or raccoons or like small vermin or slow movements going on, because that would be very annoying because it's very bright. It's meant for our dog or for us if we're going around the yard at night. It illuminates the entire yard, and it only reacts to large movements. So if you walk really slow, it's gonna stay off. So usually when I open that side door for him, he takes an immediate right and goes towards the dog run. But this time, very uncharacteristically for nighttime, he takes off sprinting towards the grass while simultaneously growling. And before I could even comprehend what he was doing and call for him to come back, because I didn't want him in the dark part of the grass, I wanted him to just go to the bathroom and come back in, I didn't realize what he was doing. He sprinted and leapt off the couple steps of the porch and illuminated the entire backyard with his large movement. And once the floodlight turned on and illuminated the entire backyard, I saw a man standing in the grass peering into our windows. It was him. It was the guy that wrote the letter. It was the guy that was in our driveway. It was him, and he was watching us read the letter. And I could only imagine his sick, sadistic mind watching us through our windows, thinking that he is tearing our marriage apart. But I got a satisfying conclusion. I saw in his eyes in that millisecond when his face got put into light, when the weasel got a flashlight pointed on him. He made a horrible error. He did not account for our dog. He had no idea we had one, and he had no idea what caliber of dog we had. He thought he was in control of this situation, playing with his puppets, watching his obsession through the windows, but in a millisecond, he was no longer in control. His sick game of peeping through windows and harassing me and my wife became a game of tug-of-war, but this game of tug-of-war was for his forearm. And that game of tug-of-war happened after he got body checked by our behemoth dog. The way Leo laid this dude out and body checked him in the chest was like an ESPN top 10 hit. I heard the air leave this man's chest like Mike Tyson ripped a liver shot. And this part, very unfortunate for him, I heard his forearm snap. Leo does this thing when you're playing tug-of-war with him with a rope where he re-grips. He pulls really hard so he could get deeper on a bite, and he did it to that man's forearm. And usually I try to tug the rope out of Leo's mouth when he's doing that to dangle it in front of him and mess with him. But Leo was not playing. He was very aggressive. He wasn't his usual self. And when he re-gripped on this man's forearm, The man tried to twist his forearm and pull it, but he actually gave a worse angle to Leo of his forearm, making it easier for him to snap his radius and ulna. And he broke those two bones like they were fragile wishbones. And after that snap, he started begging and pleading for us to restrain Leo, but I wasn't going to restrain our dog until I finished restraining him. So I planted my shin across his belly, stapling his hips to the ground to make sure I had control of his powerhouse. And I pressed his elbow across his face so he was basically kissing his bicep, and I grabbed his broken wrist around the back of his head so his knuckles were to his ear, and I held him there like a gift wrap. And I did that position specifically because I knew he wouldn't try to pull away if I had his bad arm like that. Then I had Jess call off Leo, and then I started barking instead of Leo. I started demanding answers from this dude, and I sent Jess to go get our neighbor so we had another witness there with us. But while Jess was there, he was begging and pleading, and he was looking at her, trying to get sympathy from her. But the moment that she left, he became sinister and cold and was looking at me like I wasn't even human. And he said through his teeth, "Tonight was supposed to be the worst day of your life. I was gonna take your wife like you took mine." You would think that the first thing that would come to my mind in that situation was, I didn't cheat. I would never do that to Jess. But my thought was actually a little bit vain. This dude was like late 50s, early 60s. And unless he's a sugar daddy of some sort, I don't think our dating ranges line up here. None of this situation made sense yet, but I didn't want to say anything until the others came back. So I just let this dude keep talking, because usually when you let somebody talk, they usually tell you the truth. And he continued to say in that same cold, weird tone, "You have a beautiful girl at home. What more do you need? You know I've been watching her. She's really something, you know that? Her looks are obviously good, but the way she nurtures you, the way she takes care of you in your home, you're a damn fool for taking that for granted. She sets out your outfits for the day before you wake up. She makes your favorites without even asking. She does everything for you, yet you still looked elsewhere." And I don't know why, but what this dude was saying was bothering me more than it should, because I knew I didn't do anything wrong. But it's one thing having another man gawking at your woman over her looks very specifically and just over sexualizing her. That's disrespectful in its own way and aggravating, but there's something very different about a man longing after your woman for the sweet nothings that she does for you. All of the innocent, intimate details he was bringing up were so specific, and they're all the things that I don't take for granted. And him knowing those things and watching her do them for me was more infuriating than any catcall could be. And as I'm about to slice an elbow across this dude's eyebrow for even mentioning my wife to me, Jess and my neighbor come back into the yard, and he changes his tune right away. He puts on his pleading, needing compassion voice, and he starts talking to Jess directly. And he goes, "Did he tell you about Ohio yet, Tiffany?" And at that moment, I realized that this situation could be one of two things. This dude is batshit crazy, or he thinks we're different people than we are. So I cut him off and I go, "Tiffany? If she's Tiffany, who am I?" And this dude desperately replies, but with a little sass in his voice because it's me asking the question, "George, let Tiffany answer." Then he turns his attention back towards Jess and follows up by saying, "Did he tell you about Ohio, or is that me and George's little secret?" I wasn't sure what he was playing at, but I felt like I needed to squash whatever he was saying, so I sent Jess to go get our IDs. And I decided in that intermission while Jess wasn't there, I would squeeze his arm a little extra tight and give that forearm a little crank for his troubles. You know, just for being a peeping Tom. Then when Jess came back with her IDs, I held them in my palm and I pressed them up against his squinty little eyes, and I said, "Can you read? Read my name to me." And as he was examining the ID, it looked as if he was falling into a horrible panic attack with the realization he was having. And he started hyperventilating, almost seizing, and mumbling something to himself along the lines of, oh my God, what I could have done to these people, my life is over," and just repeating things like that over and over again. And then his mumbles started to build up, and he started turning his attention towards me and to Jess, and he started crying, and those weird mumbles to himself started to turn into cries and apologies and begging for forgiveness. He was babbling through his tears, and he was having all of these demons fighting internally, and I was watching this man fall apart in front of my eyes. And he started saying things like I should never be forgiven for what I was planning to do. But as this dude was clearly falling apart and clearly not as much of a threat as he was prior, his sinister tone was completely gone. He was a puddle of himself. So I let his forearm go. I took my knee off his belly. I backed up, not far enough that I couldn't get back to him, and I let him sit up because I felt like he might suffocate under the pressure of my weight. And then once he sat up, we really started to dig into him. We really started to question him about what is going on here. Why are you here? And why are you bringing us into this? And my first question, the most obvious one, was, who did you think we were? And he explained to me that he thought I was some pilot that would fly into Ohio and sleep with his wife while he was on layover. And apparently, he came to the conclusion that our house was this pilot's house. And it all started from when he found the email correspondence between his wife and this mystery man. So I'm going to try to explain how he came to the conclusion that this was his house and I was George, the pilot that flies to Ohio and destroys marriages. So once he found the email correspondence, he went and looked at the man's email address. It was clearly an anonymous email address, but he thought it would be a good idea to try to log into that email address and say he forgot the password. So the reason he would do this was so that he could see what the recovery email address was. Because whenever you make an email address, you have to put a different email address that's a potential recovery one. You don't get to see the full recovery email, but you usually get like the first 2 numbers or letters, and you get the last 3 numbers or letters. So he did that to the first email, and he got a first initial, and he got a couple digits at the end. And then he took that recovery email, and he cross-referenced it with the people that were following his wife on Instagram. And as he was scrolling through his wife's followers, he found one profile that had the first letter that was the same as the recovery email, and the numbers, the 3 digits at the end of the recovery email, were the exact same digits that were at the end of this Instagram username. And when he went to that Instagram profile, he's scrolling through it. There's no selfies, there's no group pictures. You can't see what this person actually looks like, but their name is George. And when you go through the pictures, you see that he does spend time in Ohio. And when you cross-reference the dates from the email correspondence that he found, there's an Instagram picture from his wife's favorite restaurant in Ohio. And she said that she was out of town for a business conference that night. And now I'll get to how he got to our house. Once he knew it was this Instagram profile and he knew it was this name, he completely verified it by pressing forgot password on this Instagram account. So he put that username in, he pressed forgot password, and the recovery email on the Instagram account was the same as the recovery email from the anonymous email. So he knew for sure it was this guy. His name was George, and he's clearly a pilot, and he spends time in Ohio, and it matches up, and he's sleeping with his wife. So the next step, once you have the guy's first and last name, all you have to do is pay one of those sketchy sites to get some addresses. And wouldn't you know it, our address came up for this guy's address. So this guy came all the way to our house from Ohio and looked in our windows and saw our life. He saw me, and he assumed that I was the man that was destroying his marriage. And then a light bulb went off in my head, because once he said George and he called Jess Tiffany, I realized that we do get mail from a George and Tiffany. They definitely used to live here. We don't get mail all the time, but sometimes when you live in places, you get mail from previous tenants. It doesn't all forward to the right place, and we definitely have consistent George and Tiffany. But I have no idea where George and Tiff live now. I don't care where they live. I don't know these people. They just lived in the place that I live. I care about the fact that this man thought it was us. So I asked him dead serious, what were you planning on doing if you got in the house tonight? And this man shamefully replied, I was going to tie you up, and I was going to let you choose who was going to die tonight. And it would have happened if it wasn't for that dog of yours. You should thank him. So I look over at Leo with pride in my heart that our boy protected us. But Leo just didn't look like he was done with his human chew toy. He looked like he was ready for round 2. But our neighbor broke the silence by saying, I told you not to go in that yard, but you wanted to argue about it, so I thought I'd let you find out why. Clearly our neighbor wasn't over the argument that he had with this guy. We actually all chuckled a little bit, but simultaneously the cops were arriving, and there actually wasn't anything funny about this? This man's world got torn apart, and he almost tore our lives apart based on hate and assumption. Marriage is a sacred thing, and messing with that bond can really take people over the edge. It should be respected and cherished, and my heart was broken for that broken man and that broken marriage. But this man was dangerous, and he needed to be in custody to get the help that he needed. And we left the very next day, and we're probably settling into our new house as you're watching this. And let me tell you, we're going curtain shopping tomorrow, and we're already looking into adopting another dog. You can never be too safe. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video if you haven't already. Traumatic experience trying to get over it, but we're very excited to settle into our new house. We appreciate your ongoing support. We'll see you next week. We're going to try to post really fast, but also bear with us because we're settling into our new place. Hopefully within this week. Love you guys. We're out. And if you like this video, YouTube thinks you would also like this one, so click it.